The Belcastro estate didn't house men, it imprisoned them in gold. Cold granite walls rose like fortress cliffs beneath security lights that cut through the rain like surgical lasers. The surveillance cameras swiveled with the precision of a predator's gaze. It was a monument to the Iron Crown, a palace built on the quiet industry of fear and the heavy silence of 1,000 buried secrets. Vance entered these gates like a glitch in a perfect machine. Her red and black delivery jacket was soaked through, the nylon clinging to her skin like a second, cold layer of desperation. Her heavy boots left muddy prints on floors polished to a mirror shine. She'd taken the Priority Express route that evening, broke and reckless, her father's gambling debts piling up like scrap metal. The dispatcher had warned her, the Belcastro drop pays 5 times the rate. It also demands total silence. Don't look at the guards, don't speak unless spoken to. Never drop the box. But fate, Rain was about to discover, didn't care about delivery protocols. The lead guard, a man with a jagged tattoo snaking up his neck, checked her scanner and shoved her toward the inner sanctum. The heavy bronze doors of the inner sanctum hissed shut with a finality that felt like a guillotine blade dropping. Outside, the rain continued to lash against the granite walls of the Belcastro estate, but inside, the air had turned stagnant and electric. Aloramo Belcastro stood behind his monolithic desk, a half-amused smirk still lingering on his lips as he looked at the shivering, drenched girl standing on his priceless Persian rug. "Is this a new marketing tactic, little bird?" Aloramo asked, his voice a smooth, dangerous velvet. He gestured with a hand adorned by a heavy signet ring toward her muddy boots. "Sending the most pathetic messenger to ensure I don't shoot on sight? Or did you think the water would protect you from the heat of this house?" Vance didn't answer. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs. She held the Priority Express box out between them, her fingers white-knuckled against the cardboard. The amusement on Aloramo's face began to sour into irritation as the silence stretched. But then the sound reached him. Tick, tick, tick. It was a sharp, metallic rhythm, thin, precise, and cold. The smirk vanished from Aloramo's face as if wiped away by a ghost. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, dropped to the package. In the high-security silence of the room, the sound was as loud as a heartbeat. "Drop it," Aloramo commanded, his hand instinctively reaching for the firearm concealed beneath the desk's edge. "I can't," Rain whispered, her voice cracking. "The tape? It's reinforced with a pressure-sensitive filament. If I let go or set it down, the circuit completes." Suddenly, the red emergency lights of the estate began to pulse, bathing the gold-leafed ceiling in a rhythmic, bloody glow. A mechanical voice echoed through the hidden speakers. "Security breach. Lockdown initiated. All exits sealed." The heavy steel shutter slid down over the windows, plunging them into a claustrophobic tomb of granite and electronics. Aloramo moved with a predator's grace, stepping around the desk to loom over her. Up close, the intricate tattoos on his neck seemed to pulse in time with the emergency lights. He looked at the box, then at the girl whose eyes were wide with a terror that mirrored his own sudden vulnerability. "Tiberio," Aloramo hissed, the name of his rival tasting like poison. He looked at the sealed doors, then back at Rain. The Iron Crown was trapped in his own gilded cage, and his only hope for survival was the rain-soaked girl he had been laughing at seconds ago. The package continued its rhythmic chomp-down, a mechanical heartbeat that was now the only clock left in their world. The red strobe of the lockdown lights carved Aloramo's face into a mask of harsh shadows and crimson glares. He stood less than a foot away, his presence a suffocating weight of expensive cologne and cold, lethal authority. "If you're a suicide scout for Sforza," he rasped, his hand tightening around the grip of the pistol at his side, "you're going to be the first one to burn." Rain didn't look up. Her gaze was locked on the package, her thorny exterior replaced by a chilling mechanical focus. "If I were a scout, I wouldn't be trying to figure out if this is a mercury switch or a simple galvanic trigger," she snapped, her voice surprisingly steady for someone holding a death sentence. "Shut up and find me something sharp. Not a letter opener, a real blade." Aloramo hesitated, his pride bristling at the command, but the relentless tick-tick-tick of the box bridged the gap between king and courier. He reached into his pocket and flicked open his sleek silver pocket knife, the blade catching the red light like a shard of ruby. He didn't hand it to her, he held it steady as she leaned in, Her hands were remarkably still despite the dampness of her sleeves. "Hold the base," she commanded. "If the box tilts more than 15 degrees, we're both missed." Aloramo placed his large, tattooed hands beneath hers. The contrast was jarring, his rings and luxury watch pressed against her scarred knuckles and grease-stained cuffs. As he took the weight, Rain worked with the precision of a surgeon. She used the tip of the blade to slit the reinforced tape, not pulling it away, but slicing through the fibers until the lid was free to shift. With a slow, agonizing breath, she eased the flap open. Inside, it wasn't just a simple bundle of dynamite. It was a masterpiece of malice, a mess of multicolored wires woven around a central glass vial of translucent liquid, topped with a digital display that was currently bleeding seconds into the dark. 4:45. "It's a dual-stage detonator," Rain whispered, her eyes scanning the circuitry with a brilliance that made Aloramo go still. "The mechanical tick is just the bypass. The digital clock is the primary." He didn't want a clean hit. He wanted you to hear it coming. Aloramo stared at the glowing numbers, then at the girl. She wasn't just a delivery rider anymore. She was a woman who saw the language of the machine where he only saw a threat. "Can you stop it?" Rain reached into the hidden pocket of her delivery jacket and pulled out a pair of needle-nose pliers, the metal worn from years of fixing her bike in rain-slicked alleys. "I can stutter the clock, but the moment I touch these wires, Tiberio is going to know his toy has been tampered with." She looked Aloramo in the eye, the iron crown reflecting in her dark pupils. "When I clip this, the house isn't just a prison anymore. It's a target." The digital timer on the bomb flickered, the red numbers jumping as Rain's pliers hovered over a copper filament. Just as she prepared to make the cut, the oppressive silence of the room was shattered. The massive floor-to-ceiling monitor on the far wall, usually reserved for stock market tickers and surveillance feeds, hummed to life with a burst of static. A face materialized in high definition, Tiberio Sforza. He sat in a high-backed leather chair, a glass of dark wine in his hand, and a look of predatory satisfaction on his features. He wasn't looking at Aloramo. He was staring directly at the camera, his gaze traveling to the rain-soaked girl huddled over the explosive. "Aloramo," Tiberio's voice boomed through the room's hidden speakers, rich with a mocking warmth. "I see you found yourself a little mechanic. It's a pity. I put so much effort into the aesthetics of that device. It seems such a waste to have it handled by someone who smells of exhaust and cheap rain." Aloramo's jaw tightened, the ink on his neck darkening as his pulse quickened. He didn't move his hands from beneath the box, anchored by the weight of his own mortality. "You've breached my network, Tiberio. That is a declaration of war that won't end with a simple bang." "War?" Tiberio laughed, the sound echoing off the granite walls. "This isn't a war, Aloramo. This is an eviction. You've grown comfortable in that gilded cage. I thought I'd give you a countdown to remind you that the iron crown is made of nothing but rust." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he focused on Rain. "And you, girl, don't be a martyr for a man who would have had you thrown out by the scruff of your neck 10 minutes ago. Walk away. Let the circuit close. I might even pay your father's debts." Rain didn't flinch. She didn't even look at the screen. Her eyes were fixed on the junction where the blue wire met the primary detonator. "He's talking because he's scared," she whispered, her voice a low, thorny rasp. "He didn't expect me to open the casing. He's trying to trigger a flinch." "He's right about one thing, Aloramo," Tiberio continued, his tone shifting to a cold, clinical edge. "The house is on lockdown, but my men are already at your gates. Even if she stops the clock, you're trapped in a tomb of your own making. The shadow is already inside." The monitor flickered, showing a split-screen feed of the estate's perimeter. Dark silhouettes were moving through the rain, cutting through the heavy iron gates with industrial torches. The ticking of the bomb seemed to accelerate in Rain's ears, syncopating with the heavy thud of boots on gravel outside. "Clip it," Aloramo commanded, his eyes locked on Tiberio's smug reflection. "Clip it, and let's show him that the shadow doesn't stand a chance against the iron." Rain squeezed the pliers. The digital display froze at 0314. The mechanical ticking stopped, replaced by an even more terrifying sound, the heavy, rhythmic grinding of the estate's front doors being forced open from the outside. The silence following the frozen timer was shattered by the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of a battering ram against the estate's outer perimeter. Tiberio's shadows were no longer at the gates. They were in the throat of the house. Alaramo gripped Rain's arm, his silver signet ring cold against her skin. "The garages are compromised," he hissed, glancing at the security monitors showing his fleet of armored SUVs being systematically disabled by Sforza's saboteurs. "We're trapped." "Not yet," Rain said, her eyes darting to the service lift behind the kitchen, the one she'd used to bypass the formal greeting. "Your SUVs are tanks. They're too heavy, too loud, and too easy to track. But they didn't touch my bike. They didn't think a delivery moped was worth a bullet." They moved through the servant passages, a blur of red nylon and black tailoring. The air in the tunnels was damp, smelling of old stone and the looming threat of the storm. When they reached the delivery bay, her battered red and black bike sat alone under a flickering bulb, looking like a toy in the gargantuan stone garage. "You expect me to ride on that lawnmower?" Alaramo asked, his gaze narrowing as the sound of boots echoed from the floor above. "It's not a lawnmower. It's a ghost," Rain snapped, kicking the engine to life. The motor purred with a customized low-frequency hum. "Hold on, and don't try to lead. You know the throne, but I know the veins of this city." As the garage door ground open, a hail of gunfire sparked against the concrete. Rain didn't head for the main boulevard where the Sforza snipers waited. Instead, she swerved hard into a narrow drainage canal, the bike's tires biting into the wet slick. They plunged into the dead zones, the labyrinth of maintenance alleys, forgotten subway access tunnels, and industrial corridors that didn't exist on any GPS. Alaramo's arms were locked around her waist, his weight shifting with her as she leaned into corners so tight his expensive slacks brushed the grime-streaked walls. Above them, the city roared with the sound of Sforza's sirens and searchlights. But down here, in the concrete throat of the city, they were invisible. "They have the traffic camps bypassed," Alaramo shouted over the wind. "They'll see us the moment we hit the street." "We aren't hitting the street," Rain shouted back, her thorny focus absolute. She steered the bike onto a rusted surface ramp that led into a decommissioned shipyard. "We're staying in the shadows until we find the man who sold you out. Even Tiberio can't track what he can't see." As they emerged from the tunnels miles away, the estate was a distant pillar of smoke against the rain. The Iron Crown was officially a fugitive, and the delivery girl was the only one with the map to his survival. The shipyard was a graveyard of rusted hulls and hollowed-out warehouses, the silence broken only by the rhythmic drip of rain on corrugated metal. Rain killed the engine, the bike's low-frequency hum fading into the mist. Alaramo dismounted, his movements stiff, his tailored suit now a ruin of grease and grime. He looked at his silver watch, then at the distant, smoldering skyline, where his life's work was under siege. "We need a secure line," Alaramo asked, his voice tight with the cold fury of a betrayed king. If Tiberio breached the house, he didn't do it from the outside. He had a key. Someone in my inner circle opened the door. Rain didn't answer immediately. She was staring at the scorched cardboard remains of the delivery box, which she had strapped to the back of the bike. Her thorny gaze was fixed on a small, smudged thermal label on the underside of the lid, a detail most would have missed, but one she recognized with visceral clarity. "It wasn't a key that let him in," Rain said, her voice hollow. "It was a signature." She reached out, her finger tracing a unique, handwritten cipher scrawled in the corner of the shipping manifest. "I've seen this before. 3 weeks ago, a high-security drop at the North Docks. I delivered a legal shipment of electronics to your chief of logistics." Alarama stepped closer, the tattoos on his neck seeming to tighten as he looked at the mark. "Enzo? He's been with me since the beginning. He handled the security encryption for the entire estate. Then he's the one who encrypted your death," Rain countered. She looked up at him, her dark eyes sharp with the memory of the transaction. "He didn't just sign for the package. He used a specific shorthand, the same one on this bomb. It's a routing code used by the Sforza shadow warehouses. Your man isn't just a mole, Alaramo. He's been running Tiberio's logistics through your own shipping lanes." Alaramo's face went bone white, the realization hitting him harder than the ambush. The system hadn't failed. It had been perfectly tuned to destroy him by the person he trusted to protect it. "The exposed intruder," he whispered, the pieces of the betrayal locking into place. "Enzo was the one who insisted on the priority express delivery tonight. He knew a standard courier would be searched, but a rain-soaked girl on a moped was supposed to be the perfect fuse," Rain finished. She stood up, the adrenaline of the chase cooling into a cold, tactical resolve. She knew the Sforza warehouses better than any mobster. She had delivered to their back doors for years just to keep her father from being buried in one. "If Enzo is running their logistics, I know where he's hiding. He won't be at the estate or a safe house. He'll be at the refinery where the shipments are consolidated." Alaramo looked at her, truly seeing the delivery girl for the first time, not as a victim of circumstance, but as the only person with the map to his vengeance.
"Lead the way, Ghost," he said, his hand resting on the silver signet ring that now represented a debt he could never pay in cash. "Let's go find our mole."
The refinery loomed out of the harbor fog like a rusted iron skeleton, its steam vents hissing in rhythm with the churning tides. This was the heart of Tiberio Sforza's logistics, a place where the city's legitimate commerce was bled dry and replaced with shadow market poison. Rain led Alaramo through a gap in the perimeter fence, her movements silent, her thorny instincts guiding them through the blind spots of the revolving security cameras. "The hub is in the basement level, beneath the processing vats," Rain whispered, her breath hitching as a patrol of Sforza's men passed above them on a metal gantry. "If Enzo is running the board, he'll be in the central node. That's where the kill switch for your estate's lockdown is located." Alaramo moved with the lethal shadow of a man who had already died once that night. He didn't question her. He followed the girl who knew the secrets of the vents and the service hatches. They reached a heavy steel door marked with a faded hazard symbol. Rain didn't try to force it. Instead, she reached into the junction box beside the frame, her fingers dancing over the wiring with a familiar mechanical brilliance. With a soft thunk, the magnetic lock disengaged. They slipped inside a room filled with the hum of cooling fans and the glow of dozens of monitors. In the center of the room sat Enzo. The exposed intruder was hunched over a keyboard, his gray suit rumpled, his hands shaking as he monitored the live feed of the burning Belcastro estate. He was so absorbed in the digital carnage he had authored that he didn't hear the soft click of Alaramo's firearm. "You always were better with numbers than with loyalty, Enzo." Alaramo's voice was a low, terrifying rasp that seemed to drain the heat from the room. Enzo spun around, his chair screeching against the concrete. His face went the color of ash, his hands flying to his head in a gesture of pure, pathetic panic. "Alaramo? It wasn't Tiberio. He threatened my—" "Save the lies for the priest," Alaramo interrupted, stepping into the light. Rain didn't wait for the confrontation to end. She dove for the main console, her eyes scanning the lines of code scrolling across the screen. She found it, the dead drop protocol. It was a failsafe designed to incinerate the estate's remaining servers and anyone still trapped inside. "He's rigged a secondary blast," Rain shouted, her fingers flying across the keys. "The first bomb was just the signal. This is the cleanup." Alaramo kept his weapon leveled at Enzo's trembling brow, but his eyes were on Rain. He watched the delivery girl navigate the complex architecture of a mafia mainframe with the same grit she used to navigate the city's back alleys. She wasn't just fixing a bike anymore, she was dismantling a conspiracy. With a final, violent strike of the enter key, the monitors flashed green. The kill switch was engaged. The estate was safe, but the war was far from over. The green glow of the neutralized servers cast an eerie, sickly light across the room, but the victory felt hollow. The air in the refinery basement was suddenly too still, the hum of the cooling fans replaced by the heavy, rhythmic thud of a silenced pistol. A bullet shattered the monitor inches from Rain's head, showering her in glass sparks. "Behind you!" Alaramo roared, his voice tearing through the electronic static. From the cavernous shadows behind the cooling racks, the hidden enemy emerged. It wasn't one of Sforza's grunts, it was Alaramo's own shadow guard, a man who had stood silent behind the throne for a decade. He held a high-caliber handgun, his eyes fixed on Rain. To Tiberio, the delivery girl was the only variable that hadn't been accounted for, the witness that needed to be erased. Rain scrambled backward, her boots slipping on the slick concrete, but her path was blocked by the heavy server cabinets. The assassin leveled his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. In that split second, the power dynamic of the Iron Crown shifted. Alaramo didn't retreat into the safety of the dark. He threw himself into the line of fire. A sharp thwip echoed through the room. Alaramo grunted as the round tore through the shoulder of his tailored jacket, the impact spinning him around. Blood, dark and hot, splattered against the white ceramic of the server wall. Despite the wound, Alaramo didn't falter. He surged forward with the primal ferocity of a wolf defending its kin, his silver watch gleaming as he slammed the assassin into a cooling rack. The sound of bone meeting metal was sickeningly final. The assassin slumped to the floor, but Alaramo remained standing, his hand clamped over his bleeding shoulder. He looked down at Rain, who was curled on the floor,
her red jacket stained with his blood. For the first time, the predatory distance in his eyes was replaced by a jagged, raw sincerity. "You've spent the night saving my life, Vance," he rasped, the pain making his voice a gravelly whisper. "The Belcastro line doesn't just pay its debts in cash. We pay them in blood." Rain stood up, her hands trembling as she reached out to steady him. The Iron Crown was leaning on the delivery girl, his heavy signet ring pressing into her palm. She realized then that the debt was no longer about a package or a ticking clock. By taking a bullet meant for a girl she had mocked hours ago, Alaramo had shattered the hierarchy of the city. As the sirens of Tiberio's reinforcements began to wail in the distance, Rain didn't see a boss and a servant. She saw two survivors bound by a crimson thread. "We have to go," she whispered, her thorny resilience returning as she draped his uninjured arm over her shoulder. "The docks are crawling with them, but I know a way out through the tidal basins."
The refinery's upper deck was a labyrinth of hissing steam and groaning steel, a cathedral of industry where the air tasted of salt and high-octane fuel. This was the assembly point, the cold, sterile workshop where Tiberio's engineers had wired the very bomb Rain had carried. Now it was a killing floor. Rain supported Alaramo's weight as they moved through the skeletal shadows of the chemical vats, his blood a dark, rhythmic trail on the diamond plate flooring. "There," Alaramo breathed, nodding toward the central loading bay. Tiberio Sforza stood under the harsh glare of industrial floodlights, surrounded by the remnants of his shadow detail. He was no longer the calm aristocrat from the monitor. His silk tie was loosened, and his face was twisted into a mask of frantic rage as he watched his empire's logistics go dark on his handheld tablet. Beside him sat a secondary device, the master detonator, a twin to the one Rain had stabilized, designed to trigger the refinery's own volatile gas lines. "You're late for the finale, Alaramo," Tiberio screamed over the roar of a nearby steam vent. He held his thumb over the detonator sensor. "If I can't have the city, I'll turn this harbor into a sun." Alaramo leaned against a rusted pillar, his hand tightening around his weapon, but his tremors were too visible. The blood loss was slowing his brilliance. He looked at Rain, a silent, desperate command passing between them. He would provide the thunder. She would have to be the lightning. As Alaramo stepped into the light, drawing a hail of gunfire from Tiberio's men, Rain dropped to the floor. She moved like a ghost through the network of pipes beneath the gantry. Her thorny focus narrowed until the world was nothing but valves, pressure gauges, and the mechanical logic of the refinery. She didn't head for Tiberio. She headed for the primary fuel intake. "You think a delivery girl can save you now?" Tiberio roared, his eyes tracking Alaramo as he crawled behind a steel drum. He didn't see Rain until she was directly beneath the detonator's wireless receiver. With a jagged piece of scrap metal and the pliers she had used to save the Iron Crown, she bypassed the refinery's safety seal. "I'm not saving him, Tiberio shouted, her voice cutting through the mechanical din. "I'm delivering a return to sender." She wrenched the emergency vent. A massive, blinding wall of superheated steam erupted between Tiberio and the detonator, the sheer force of the pressure knocking the villain backward. In the chaos of the whiteout, Alaramo found his mark. 3 shots rang out, precise and final. The master detonator fell from Tiberio's lifeless hand, skittering across the metal floor. Rain lunged for it, catching the device before it hit the ground. The countdown on the screen hissed to a halt. 001. The refinery ground, the pressure equalizing into a low, defeated hum. The final war was over, and as the steam cleared, the delivery girl stood amidst the wreckage of 2 empires, holding the heart of the city in her hands. The morning sun struggled to pierce the heavy gray shroud over the Han River, casting a pale, cinematic light over the soot-stained refinery. The sirens of the official world were finally approaching, but they were miles too late to witness the transition of power. Rain sat on the edge of the loading dock, her raven black jacket scorched and stiff with dried blood, her fingers finally ceasing their mechanical tremor. Beside her, Alaramo Belcastro leaned giggling, a fresh medical wrap visible beneath his torn silk shirt. He didn't look like a boss. He looked like a man who had seen the bottom of the abyss and found a hand reaching back for him. He reached into his inner pocket, pulling out a heavy, cream-colored envelope. There were no marks on it, no signatures, just the weight of a life transformed. He slid it across the cold metal toward her. "The gambling debts are gone," Alaramo rasped, his voice regaining its velvet authority. Your father's name has been wiped from every ledger in this city. This is for the girl who didn't run when the clock started ticking. Rain looked at the envelope but didn't reach for it. Her thorny resilience remained, but the cynicism had burned away in the refinery steam. I didn't do it for the money, Alaramo. I did it because I was tired of being the only one who saw the bomb. Alaramo let out a low, dark chuckle. He pulled the silver signet ring from his finger, the symbol of the Iron Crown, and placed it on top of the envelope. The city thinks you're a ghost. Sforza's men think you're a demon. My own pack thinks you're a miracle. You can take that cash and disappear, Rain. You could buy a house where it never rains. He paused, his dark eyes locking onto hers with a jagged sincerity. Or you can stay. No more bikes, no more cheap jackets. My syndicate needs a ghost courier, someone who moves through the dead zones where the law and the lawless can't follow, someone who sees the wires before they're pulled. Rain looked at the ring, then at the sprawling, broken city below. For years, she had been a delivery girl, a nameless cog in a machine that wanted to grind her down. Now she was the only person the Iron Crown trusted with his life. She reached out, her hand closing not around the money but the silver ring. I have a condition, she said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. Alaramo nodded, a look of profound respect softening his features. As the armored motorcade of the Grey Wolves arrived to collect their king, they didn't see a waitress or a maid. They saw the legend of the docks, the woman who had delivered a revolution. The debt was cleared, the delivery was made, and Rain Vance finally stepped out of the shadows and into the throne room.